Captain Marcus Hale had seen worlds die. He had walked through cities torn apart by war, floated through the remains of shattered colonies, and looked into the hollow eyes of soldiers who had survived battles that should have broken them entirely. Yet even after all the horrors he had faced, there was something about this planet that made the weight of his boots feel heavier. The air was thin, carrying a faint metallic tang, and the wind whispered through crumbling buildings like ghostly echoes of lives long gone. Orion 12, once a sanctuary for refugees from countless alien conflicts, now lay in silence, a shadow of its former self. Marcus had come here on a mission, technically speaking. Officially, he was sent to survey the planet for any signs of remaining life or recoverable resources. Unofficially, he had come for something else entirely, something he would not admit even to himself. The universe had a way of burning away hope, but sometimes, if one walked carefully, one could find small pieces of it hidden among the ashes. The veteran walked slowly through the rubble-strewn streets, his boot heels crunching on the dust. Broken pieces of what had once been a market littered the ground, shattered containers, scorched cloth, and twisted metal. The buildings leaned like old men, tired and fragile. Marcus ran a gloved hand along the edge of a cracked wall, noting the alien symbols etched faintly into the stone. They spoke of a language he did not fully understand, but the shapes carried a quiet beauty, a rhythm that suggested lives filled with ordinary joys. Meals shared, laughter, and games played in sunlight. As he turned a corner, something small and brightly colored caught his eye. At first, he thought it was debris, an odd piece of alien trash, but when he knelt to examine it, he realized it was a lunchbox. Its paint was chipped, and the once vibrant design of playful stars and smiling creatures had dulled under the weight of dust and neglect. Marcus frowned. Lunchboxes weren't remarkable objects, yet this one felt different. It belonged to a child, and for some reason, that fact hit him harder than anything he had seen in the war zones of his own planet. He picked up the box carefully, as if it might break under the gentlest pressure. The lid creaked faintly when he opened it, revealing emptiness. Not a single crumb, no remnants of food, just a small, folded piece of paper lying at the bottom. Marcus's trained eyes examined it. The paper bore delicate lines of alien script, arranged neatly in rows, though the words were beyond his ability to read. He could, however, make out simple drawings. A small figure with wide eyes, a hand reaching toward a star, and another hand reaching toward another, smaller one. He felt a lump in his throat. He had seen many things in his life, yet the vulnerability captured in this small, abandoned lunchbox shook him. He had held weapons that could destroy cities, had made life-or-death decisions in seconds, and had stared into the eyes of enemies who meant him harm. But here, in this small, innocent object, there was something far more profound, a silent plea for connection. Marcus placed the lunchbox gently back on the ground, brushing dust from its surface as if he were handling something sacred. His mind wandered. How had this child survived? Where was she now? Was she still alive, hiding somewhere among the ruins, or had she been taken, lost to the chaos that had swept across the planet? He felt a strange tightness in his chest, an unfamiliar mix of fear and hope that he could not easily explain. The veteran began to walk through the ruins more carefully, his eyes scanning for any trace of life. Broken toys, fragments of clothing, and tiny footprints in the dust suggested that someone had been here recently. Small signs of a life once lived, bits of fabric twisted into makeshift dolls, scraps of food left to dry in the sun, spoke volumes about resilience. Whoever this child was, she had survived on her own for some time. Marcus's heart tightened. He had faced enemies, storms, and starvation, but the thought of a child navigating this world alone cut deeper than any battle wound ever had. As he moved deeper into the outpost, he noticed other traces. Tiny handprints pressed into soft mud by what must have been a makeshift riverbank. Marks on the walls, drawn in an alien pigment depicting simple shapes, stars, trees, hands, and suns. These were not complex messages. They were the art of someone who wanted to leave a trace, to assert that they existed, even if no one was there to see it. Marcus knelt, examining one of the drawings closely. He traced the lines with his finger, feeling an inexplicable kinship with the unknown artist. He remembered his own childhood, the small, comforting routines that had seemed insignificant at the time. A warm meal, a favorite toy, a familiar voice calling his name. The war had stripped him of most of these memories, leaving scars both visible and invisible. And yet, here in this abandoned alien outpost, he felt a spark of something he thought he had lost entirely: empathy. The thought was strange and uncomfortable. He had trained himself to be a soldier, to suppress feelings, to focus on mission objectives and survival. But as he looked at the tiny remnants of life scattered across the ruins, he realized that some instincts could not be overridden. The need to protect, the need to nurture, the need to connect. Marcus continued his search carefully, moving from building to building. The light from Orion 12's twin suns filtered through cracked walls, casting long shadows across the debris. Dust swirled in the air, making it hazy and dreamlike, as though the entire world were suspended in a fragile moment of time. Every step he took was deliberate, every movement measured. He had learned long ago that carelessness could mean death, but now the stakes felt different. This time, he was not looking to survive himself, he was searching for someone else. Hours passed, and the sun began to lower, casting the ruins in a warm, golden glow. Marcus's stomach ached with hunger and his muscles protested, but he did not stop. He felt a quiet urgency, a sense that he was on the edge of discovering something important. At last, he came across a partially collapsed building. The door hung crookedly on its hinges, and the floor was littered with dust and debris. Inside, he saw something that made him pause. A small blanket, folded neatly, lay tucked in a corner. Beside it, a few scraps of food had been left in a cracked container. It was clear that someone had been here recently. The footprints around the blanket suggested a small occupant. Marcus knelt to examine them. The size, the shape, without a doubt, they belonged to a child. A surge of determination filled him. He had fought countless battles for survival, for territory, for honor. But this was different. This was a mission born of instinct, not orders. He would find this child. He would make sure she was safe. He stood, scanning the surrounding area for any other signs. Faint markings on the wall caught his eye, small handprints smeared with a color that looked like crushed berries. The patterns were whimsical, almost playful, as though someone had tried to leave messages for anyone who might come after them. Marcus followed the trail carefully, each step measured, each breath controlled. The ruins seemed endless, yet he felt certain that he was close. Finally, he heard it, the faintest sound of movement. A soft shuffle, almost imperceptible, carried through the air. Marcus froze, his heart raced. He was trained to detect enemies, to anticipate threats, yet the sound made him nervous in a completely different way. He knew in that instant that he was not facing a foe but someone fragile, someone vulnerable. His mind flashed to the lunchbox, to the drawings, to the small plea for connection. The realization struck him with overwhelming force. He might be the only person left who could help this child. He called out softly, careful not to scare her. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The words were simple, human, but they carried the weight of reassurance, the kind of trust that could not be demanded, only earned. There was a pause, a long moment where nothing moved. Then a small figure emerged from the shadows. Pale-skinned, wide-eyed, trembling, she clutched a toy close to her chest. Her gaze was cautious, curious, and full of fear. Marcus lowered himself to her level, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He extended a hand, not to grab, not to pull, but to offer. She hesitated, then with a faint, tentative motion, reached toward him. Marcus felt a lump in his throat, a strange warmth spreading through his chest. In that instant, the ruins of Orion 12, the echoes of war, the countless deaths he had witnessed, they all faded. There was only this small, fragile being, and the simple, profound truth that he had to protect her. Marcus Hale had faced countless horrors in his life, but nothing had touched him as deeply as this moment. The universe was vast, cold, and often cruel, yet in the small, trembling hand of an alien child, he found a spark of something enduring: hope. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that perhaps, even in the darkest corners of space, there was a chance for life, for connection, for healing. Marcus Hale stayed perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the small alien child before him. Her wide, shimmering eyes reflected both fear and curiosity, and her tiny body shook ever so slightly. She clutched her broken toy close to her chest, pressing it like a shield against the world. Marcus knew from experience that children, even alien ones, could sense sincerity. Any false movement, any hint of aggression would send her fleeing, possibly into danger. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said again, his voice soft, low, and deliberate. He crouched even lower, keeping his hand extended in a non-threatening way. The ruins around them were silent except for the distant wind, and the faint crunch of dust beneath his boots seemed almost deafening in the stillness. Marcus waited, patience honed from years of waiting for ambushes, but this was different. There was no enemy, only a fragile life that depended on his choices. The girl tilted her head slightly, examining him. Her movements were careful, almost cautious, as if measuring the risk. Marcus could see the fear in her eyes, but also a glimmer of recognition, an instinctive understanding that he meant no harm. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she took a step forward, then another. The distance between them closed in tiny increments, each one fraught with tension and hope. Marcus noticed the scars on the walls around them, marks from broken buildings, bullet holes, clawed metal, and scorch marks. The world here had been torn apart by conflict, yet even amid the ruins there were signs of care. Someone had tried to create small comforts, a patch of soft cloth in a corner, scattered toys arranged carefully, and faint drawings on the walls. The child's footprints led past these signs, suggesting she had been living in this ruined place for some time, making the best of what little remained. Finally, the girl reached him. She hesitated for a moment, her small hand hovering above his, then touched it lightly. Marcus felt a strange warmth surge through his chest, a mixture of relief and something he could only describe as wonder. It had been years since he had felt this close to innocence, this untouched by the horrors of war. In that instant, all the battles he had fought, all the decisions that had weighed on his conscience, felt distant. Here was something worth protecting. Marcus gestured for her to follow him, careful not to rush or frighten her. She looked at him, then back toward the ruins she had called home, her gaze uncertain. Slowly, she nodded and began to walk beside him. Marcus noticed the way her steps faltered at uneven ground, the way she clutched the toy to her chest as if it were a talisman. His veteran instincts kicked in. He scanned the area for threats, for hidden dangers, collapsed ceilings, weak floor supports, and unstable walls, but found none. It was as if the planet itself was holding its breath, allowing them this moment of fragile connection. As they moved, Marcus tried to communicate. He didn't know her language, and she clearly didn't know his, but words were not always necessary. He pointed to himself and said, "Marcus," then extended his hand toward her. She repeated something in her alien tongue, a soft, melodic sound. Marcus smiled gently. Names were the beginning of trust. Slowly, he pointed to the ruined buildings around them, trying to indicate that he was aware of the dangers, that he could guide her safely. They moved through the outpost cautiously, and Marcus began to notice more of the signs she had left behind. Small drawings etched into stone walls showed scenes of daily life. A sun rising over a city, a small creature chasing a ball, and figures holding hands. One drawing showed a family, but one figure was missing, a circle left empty. Marcus's chest tightened. He didn't know the details, but he understood the story: loss, separation, survival. The child had endured more than most beings could imagine, yet she had not given up. At one point, the girl paused near a wall and touched one of the drawings, her small fingers tracing the etched lines. She hummed a soft tune, unfamiliar to Marcus but oddly comforting. He crouched beside her, allowing her space but observing carefully. The tune, he realized, was a song of memory, a way to preserve the past in a world that had tried to erase it. Marcus felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. Soldiers were not supposed to cry, but he could not stop himself. The beauty and fragility of her small existence, set against the vast devastation around them, broke something open inside him. They continued moving through the ruins, Marcus guiding her, watching for danger, and the girl slowly warming to his presence. They found more remnants of her life. A small container that had held food, scraps of cloth she had fashioned into dolls, and a blanket tucked under a fallen beam. She pointed to the blanket and made a sound that Marcus guessed meant home or safe place. He nodded, understanding instinctively. The concept of safety, of a sanctuary, transcended language. Marcus realized that his mission had changed. He was no longer here merely to survey the planet or follow orders. He was here to protect this small life, to give her what the universe had taken from so many: the chance to be seen, cared for, and loved. The realization settled on him like a heavy mantle, but it was not unwelcome. In fact, it gave him purpose beyond the endless cycle of war and destruction that had defined his life for decades. As the day turned to evening, the twin suns of Orion 12 dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the ruins. The light was warm and golden, painting the broken buildings in a surreal glow. Marcus and the girl paused on a small ridge, looking out over what remained of the outpost. She leaned slightly against him, her trust growing with each shared step. He felt a strange, quiet joy, the kind that only comes from knowing that one's actions, small as they may be, could make a profound difference in another life. Marcus knelt to examine the lunchbox again. It had been empty when he first found it, but now it felt symbolic, a vessel of hope waiting to be filled. He opened it carefully, imagining that one day it could hold food or treasures or memories. For now, it was a reminder of what they were both seeking: connection, safety, and a small piece of normalcy in a universe that had offered them little of either. The girl watched him with wide eyes, curious about the object that seemed so important to him. Marcus smiled softly and gestured for her to come closer. She did, tentatively. He showed her the small note inside, pointing to the simple drawings and humming softly, mimicking the tune she had sung earlier. Her face lit up with recognition, and for the first time since he had found her, she laughed. It was a small, delicate sound, yet it carried a weight of relief, of hope, of life pushing back against despair. Marcus realized that laughter, even from someone so small and so alien, was a bridge. It connected them, transcending language, species, and experience. In that moment, he understood something he had long forgotten. The human heart was resilient, capable of empathy, compassion, and love even in the harshest conditions. The universe could be cruel, but these small sparks of connection could shine brighter than any sun. Night fell and the temperature dropped. Marcus knew they could not stay in the open for long. The ruins were unstable, and the cold would be dangerous for the girl. He scanned the surrounding area, searching for shelter. He found a partially intact building, its walls leaning but still standing. Carefully, he guided her inside, checking for weak supports and hidden dangers. Once satisfied, he set the blanket she had shown him on the floor, creating a small, safe space. She sat on it, clutching her toy, while Marcus arranged the remnants of her belongings around her. He built a small fire from scraps of wood and debris that had survived the destruction. The flickering light cast shadows on the walls, bringing the drawings and carvings to life. Marcus felt a sense of accomplishment, not the kind born from military victory, but the kind born from creating safety, from protecting life, from offering warmth in a cold world. The girl watched the flames with fascination, her eyes reflecting the light. She hummed again softly, a melody that seemed to speak of comfort, home, and trust. As Marcus sat nearby, he realized how much he had missed moments like this. War had taught him to fight, to survive, to be wary of others. But it had never taught him to nurture, to protect without expectation of reward, to see hope in fragile forms. This child, small and trembling, had reminded him of the simplest yet most profound truth. Even in the darkest corners of space, life was worth saving, and humanity's capacity for care could transcend every boundary. Hours passed in quiet companionship. Marcus watched as the girl finally rested, her eyes growing heavy with sleep. He kept his hand near hers, a silent promise that she was safe, that she would not be alone. Outside, the wind moaned through the ruins, carrying with it the ghosts of the past. Yet inside this fragile sanctuary there was warmth, there was trust, and there was a spark of life that refused to be extinguished. Marcus Hale, veteran of countless battles and survivor of worlds lost to war, felt something he had thought impossible, a sense of peace. It was not victory, not glory, not fame. It was something simpler, purer, yet infinitely more profound. It was the knowledge that he had found someone to protect, someone whose life mattered in the vast, uncaring expanse of the universe. And in protecting her, he had rediscovered a part of himself long buried beneath layers of pain, anger, and survival. As night deepened, Marcus allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The universe was still vast, still dangerous, and still cruel. But tonight, in the small company of a frightened alien child, there was hope. There was connection. There was life. And Marcus knew, with the quiet certainty that came from years of experience, that he would follow this path wherever it led, no matter the cost. He closed his eyes briefly, listening to her steady breathing, and whispered to himself, "We'll be all right. I promise." The words carried a weight that was both human and universal, a vow forged in the quiet spaces between chaos and survival. Somewhere deep within, Marcus felt the stirrings of a truth he had long forgotten. that even in the darkest corners of space, the human heart could shine brightly, and that small acts of care could change the course of countless lives. Marcus Hale had never felt such a heavy sense of responsibility in his life. The small alien child who had begun to trust him was sleeping quietly on the blanket he had arranged, her small chest rising and falling with each breath. Outside, the ruins of Orion 12 were silent under the twin moons, yet he knew that silence was a fragile thing. Danger could come in many forms: hostile scavengers, unstable buildings, or the unpredictable wilds of the planet. His military instincts told him to stay alert, but his human instincts told him something else. He needed to understand her story. The next morning, the girl awoke before he did, rubbing her eyes and looking around cautiously. Marcus smiled gently and gestured for her to stay calm. He realized that patience was the key. Trust had to be earned, not demanded. Slowly, she moved closer to him, her tiny fingers brushing against his hand as if seeking reassurance. Marcus nodded, understanding that this simple gesture was more than contact. It was communication, a way to bridge the gap between two species without words. After a quiet breakfast of preserved food he had scavenged, Marcus decided they needed to explore the outpost more thoroughly. There were signs that the girl had survived here for weeks, perhaps months, but he needed to understand how she had managed, and whether there were any dangers lurking nearby. As they moved through the ruins, Marcus noticed more drawings etched into walls, each one telling a small story. A sun rising over a city, a creature sharing a meal, hands reaching out to one another. He began to piece together a picture. This child had known family, had experienced love and warmth, and had been torn from it all by conflict. The loneliness she had endured was immense, yet she had survived through ingenuity, courage, and small acts of hope. Marcus felt a lump in his throat. He had fought wars to protect people, but rarely had he seen such resilience distilled into one small being. As they moved further into the outpost, a strange sound reached Marcus's ears. It was subtle at first, a faint scraping like metal against metal, but it became louder, accompanied by a low, guttural growl. He immediately crouched, signaling for the girl to stay close. His instincts told him they were not alone. The ruins of Orion 12 were dangerous not only because of the aftermath of war, but because creatures had begun to claim the planet as their own. Predators that had adapted to the desolate environment moved silently, waiting for careless travelers. The girl instinctively pressed against him, sensing the danger in his body language. Marcus spoke softly in tones he hoped would comfort her, though he knew the creatures likely did not care for his words. He scanned the shadows, searching for movement. Then he saw it, a figure, low to the ground, moving with both caution and hunger. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, reflecting the twin moons above. Marcus recognized it from his reconnaissance reports, scavenger beasts that had learned to hunt both by night and by ruins. They were intelligent predators, quick and aggressive. Marcus assessed the situation calmly, despite the surge of adrenaline in his veins. His years of combat had trained him for life-or-death decisions, and though this was not a battle between soldiers, it was a battle for survival nonetheless. He lifted his weapon, aimed carefully, and whispered to the girl to stay behind him. She hesitated, fear evident on her small face, but obeyed instinctively. Marcus's finger hovered on the trigger, waiting for the right moment to act. The creatures advanced slowly, their movements calculated, almost intelligent. Marcus realized they were testing him, testing the safety of their prey. He could see the hunger in their eyes, but he could also see hesitation. They were used to scavenging weak, isolated prey, and here was something different. Here was a human veteran, calm, focused, and prepared. With a controlled breath, Marcus fired. The shots echoed through the ruins, each one precise, aimed to incapacitate rather than kill outright. One creature fell while the other snarled and retreated, sensing the risk was greater than the reward. Marcus didn't celebrate. There was no time for victory. He turned immediately to the girl, ensuring she was unharmed. She was trembling but safe, her eyes wide and full of a mixture of fear and awe. "It's okay," Marcus said softly, lowering his weapon. "You're safe now." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of truth. The girl blinked, her trembling fingers brushing against the lunchbox they had found the day before. Marcus smiled, understanding that for her, the lunchbox was not just a container. It was a symbol of care, protection, and hope. As they continued through the ruins, Marcus began to search for more clues about her past. He found small, personal items, a tiny scarf she had fashioned from scraps, bits of food carefully stored, and more drawings. One of the drawings showed a larger family, but the small figure representing her had been separated, wandering alone. Marcus felt a surge of empathy. He could not change what had happened, but he could ensure that she would not have to endure further abandonment. They came to a partially collapsed building, one that seemed to have been used as a temporary shelter. Marcus inspected the structure carefully, noting weak beams and cracked walls. It was precarious, but it would do for now. He guided the girl inside, helping her navigate the unstable ground. She moved slowly, trusting him entirely, and Marcus felt a quiet pride in the trust she had placed in him. It was fragile, like a delicate flower, but it was real. Inside the building, Marcus found more remnants of alien life. Small tools, containers, and toys had been hidden in corners. One item caught his attention, a small, broken music box. He picked it up carefully and wound the key. A soft, melancholic tune played, echoing through the ruined building. The girl's eyes widened and she clutched the music box close, tears forming in her eyes. Marcus realized that this was more than just a toy. It was a memory, a connection to a life she had lost. He knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm here now. I won't let anything happen to you." The girl pressed the music box against her chest, drawing comfort from its familiar tune. Marcus felt a lump in his throat. In all his years of battle, he had never felt such a pure, urgent need to protect someone. This was not about duty or orders. This was about humanity, about the instinct to care for another life. As night fell, Marcus set up a small area for them to rest. He used the blanket she had brought, the lunchbox, and the small scraps of food they had found to create a temporary sanctuary. He sat beside her, keeping watch while she slept. The ruins outside were silent, but he knew danger was never far away. Yet for the first time, he felt a sense of purpose that went beyond mere survival. He was not just a soldier. He was a protector, a guardian of life in a universe that had taken so much. The following morning, Marcus awoke to find the girl already awake, staring out at the horizon. She seemed more confident, her small posture straighter, her eyes less fearful. Marcus smiled gently. "Ready to explore?" he asked. She nodded, and together they began moving through the ruins again. As they explored, Marcus noticed something unusual, tracks leading away from the ruins, faint but distinct. They were not the girl's, nor were they from animals. Someone else had been here, someone alive, moving carefully, perhaps searching. Marcus's instincts warned him that this could be dangerous. He knelt beside the girl, explaining in gestures that they would need to be cautious. Her eyes reflected understanding, and she moved closer to him, holding his hand for reassurance. The tracks led them to a large, open area where remnants of a human settlement had once stood. Broken walls and rusted vehicles littered the ground. Marcus scanned the area carefully, noting every shadow, every movement. Then he saw it, a figure moving in the distance, half hidden by debris. He could not make out details, but the posture suggested intelligence, intent, and possibly threat. Marcus crouched behind a piece of rubble, signaling the girl to stay behind him. His mind raced. He had faced enemies before, but this was different. This was not a soldier or a known threat. It was unknown, unpredictable. Yet he was not afraid. Fear had little place here. What mattered was protection, strategy, and instinct. The figure moved closer, and Marcus could now see that it was humanoid but alien. Its eyes reflected caution, and it carried something in its arms. His heart skipped a beat as he realized what it was, another child, similar in size to the girl beside him. Marcus felt a surge of hope and anxiety at the same time. Perhaps the girl had not been alone. Perhaps there was someone else who needed protection. He motioned for the girl to stay low, then slowly approached the other child, keeping his hands visible. The alien child held out the small figure she carried, and Marcus realized that it was a tiny life, fragile and vulnerable. He spoke softly, though he doubted it would be understood, and extended his hands. The two children, recognizing the gesture, moved closer together, and Marcus caught the smaller one carefully. For a moment, the ruins seemed to hold their breath. Two small lives, each marked by loss, each surrounded by devastation, were now connected. Marcus felt a deep, almost overwhelming surge of emotion. He had come to Orion 12 expecting emptiness, yet he had found life, courage, and resilience. He had found the essence of humanity, not in himself alone, but in the instinct to protect, to care, and to connect. Marcus Hale held the smaller child close, feeling the fragile warmth of her tiny body against his chest. The first girl, the one he had discovered days ago, clutched his other hand, her eyes wide with curiosity and cautious joy. The ruins of Orion 12 stretched around them, quiet and desolate, yet in that moment, Marcus realized that the planet was no longer entirely lifeless. Life existed here, in small, trembling forms, in the courage of those who refused to give up, and in the instinct of one human to protect what remained. He carefully surveyed the area, scanning for threats. The first creature attack had been a warning. Survival on this planet was never guaranteed. Yet Marcus had learned something vital over the past days. Danger existed, yes, but fear could not dominate his decisions. His responsibility was clear: protect the children, guide them, and ensure they survived long enough to reclaim a measure of safety. The bond that had formed between him and the first girl had grown stronger every day. A quiet thread of trust woven through small gestures, soft words, and the sharing of meals and warmth. As the children moved closer to him, Marcus noticed the way their small hands intertwined, a silent acknowledgement that they were not alone. He had seen this in his own species countless times, the way children clung to hope, even in the bleakest moments. It transcended language and culture, species and experience. Here, among alien ruins, it was the same. These children, innocent yet remarkably resilient, had found a source of security in him. He felt the weight of that trust, the immense responsibility, and something deeper, a purpose that went beyond the battlefield, beyond orders, beyond survival. Marcus decided they needed a more stable shelter. The partially collapsed building had served for a short while, but it was too exposed. He began leading the children toward a larger structure he had noticed during his previous explorations. The journey was slow. Every step required vigilance. The ruins were treacherous, with weakened beams, hidden pits, and unstable floors. Marcus moved carefully, helping each child over rubble and past obstacles, speaking softly to reassure them with a calm tone. Each word, though perhaps incomprehensible in their alien language, carried meaning through cadence, tone, and intent. Along the way, Marcus noticed more traces of the child's past, small carvings and drawings etched into walls and stones. They told stories of a life interrupted, families separated, friends lost, meals shared in moments of calm, and the ever-present longing for safety. Marcus felt a deep sorrow. He had faced loss, too, comrades, cities, even parts of himself. But witnessing this small, alien life forced him to confront the universality of suffering. It was the same everywhere: the pain of separation, the struggle to survive, and the unyielding hope that someone, somewhere, would care enough to act. Finally, they reached the structure Marcus had spotted before. It was larger, more intact than the smaller shelters they had used, with walls that still held firm against the shifting winds and weak beams that could be reinforced. He inspected it thoroughly, checking for danger, then motioned for the children to follow. Inside, the children's eyes lit up. It was not home, not yet, but it was shelter, and in that moment it was enough. Marcus allowed them to explore the space while he examined the surroundings, ensuring there were no hidden threats. Once satisfied, he began organizing a temporary living area. He cleared debris, rearranged the few belongings the children had, and created small sleeping areas using scraps of cloth and blankets. The first girl placed the lunchbox and broken toy carefully in a corner, while the second child, smaller and still timid, mimicked the movements. Marcus watched them with a quiet sense of pride. He had faced battles, wars, and calamities, but the act of creating safety, of giving life a chance, was more significant than any victory he had ever claimed. As evening approached, the twin moons of Orion 12 rose, casting a soft silver light across the room. Marcus built a small fire using scraps of wood and debris, careful to ensure it would not ignite the weakened structure. The children sat close, fascinated by the flickering light. Marcus smiled. The fire was more than warmth. It was a symbol, a reminder that even in the darkest places there could be light. He handed them small pieces of preserved food. The first girl looked up at him, her eyes wide with gratitude, while the second child hesitated, unsure but trusting him enough to take a piece. Marcus felt an overwhelming surge of emotion. The universe had shown him devastation after devastation, yet here in this small, fragile sanctuary he had found hope. It was quiet, unassuming, yet profoundly powerful. Life, it seemed, refused to be extinguished entirely. That night, as the children slept, Marcus remained vigilant. His mind wandered back to his past, to battles fought and comrades lost, to the endless cycle of destruction he had known. And yet he realized that all that had prepared him for this. Every hardship, every challenge, every painful choice had led him here, to a place where the stakes were not about territory or politics, but about life itself. Protecting these children, guiding them through a dangerous and uncertain world, was the highest calling he had ever known. Morning came, and with it, a sense of calm and determination. Marcus decided it was time to move forward, to find a more permanent solution for the children. He could not stay in the ruins forever. Somewhere beyond the horizon, there were likely others, other survivors, other safe places, perhaps even friendly colonies willing to take in these small lives. Marcus did not know the exact path, but he knew that he could not hesitate. The children's lives depended on action, not reflection. As they traveled, Marcus noticed signs of life he had not seen before. Small plants sprouting through cracks in the ruins, distant water sources glinting in the sun, and faint tracks indicating other beings had passed this way. He explained to the first girl, using gestures and simple words, that the world was not entirely barren, that there was hope, and that they could find safety. She nodded, her eyes reflecting understanding and trust. The second child, still tentative, mirrored her movements, and Marcus felt a deep sense of connection between all three of them. Hours into their journey, they encountered a partially collapsed bridge. The structure was weak, spanning a narrow ravine that led to a denser part of the ruins. Marcus assessed the risks carefully. One wrong step could be fatal. He guided the children, placing his hands firmly to steady them, speaking softly and encouragingly. Each step required courage, patience, and trust. The children followed, their small hands gripping his tightly, and together they crossed safely. Marcus felt a surge of relief. Survival on Orion 12 was never simple, but together they could overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable alone. Once across, Marcus paused to rest. The children sat on rocks, catching their breath and examining the surrounding area. Marcus allowed himself a moment of reflection. These small lives, so innocent yet so strong, were living reminders of humanity's capacity to endure, to hope, and to protect. He had seen countless civilizations destroyed, yet he had never witnessed such resilience distilled into such tiny beings. He realized that what he felt was more than duty. It was awe, admiration, and a profound recognition of the value of life itself. As night fell once more, Marcus decided to make camp in a small alcove near the edge of the ruins. He built a fire, arranged the children safely, and allowed them to explore the small area under his watchful eye. The first girl placed the lunchbox beside her, then carefully set the broken toy atop it. Marcus observed quietly. These small rituals were more than habit. They were acts of hope, reminders that life could continue even in the harshest conditions. In the quiet hours of the night, Marcus thought about the future. He did not know where they would go next, what dangers awaited them, or how long it would take to find true safety. But he knew one thing: he would not abandon these children. He would protect them, guide them, and ensure that they had a chance at life, no matter the cost. For Marcus Hale, the battles he had fought in the past were no longer his defining moments. This act of care, protection, and connection was his true mission. The children slept peacefully, and Marcus allowed himself to close his eyes briefly. He remembered the lunchbox he had first found, empty and abandoned. Now it represented something far greater: possibility, trust, and the enduring spark of hope. In his mind, he imagined filling it one day, not just with food, but with small treasures, symbols of a life rebuilt, and reminders that even in a universe filled with darkness, there was light. Morning came again, and Marcus guided the children onward toward a brighter horizon. They encountered more ruins, more signs of life, and more challenges, yet with each step their confidence grew. Marcus's heart swelled with pride. The children were no longer just fragile survivors. They were symbols of resilience, courage, and the indomitable spirit that defined humanity and its allies. By the time they reached a hill overlooking the remains of the outpost, Marcus paused. The twin suns rose again, casting golden light across the ruins. The children looked up at him, eyes shining with trust and hope. He knelt, placing his hands on their shoulders, and smiled. No words were needed. The message was clear. Together they could face the challenges ahead. Together they could survive, rebuild, and even thrive. Marcus Hale, veteran of wars and witness to countless tragedies, felt tears well in his eyes. He had expected nothing from Orion 12 but emptiness, yet he had found life, hope, and a renewed sense of purpose. In the hands of these small alien children, he had discovered the essence of humanity: compassion, protection, and the courage to care even when the universe offered little in return. He whispered softly, though the children may not understand the words, "We'll make it." "I promise." The children smiled, one clutching the lunchbox, the other holding the broken toy, and Marcus knew that this promise was more than words. It was a vow forged in action, courage, and unshakable trust. And as the twin suns of Orion 12 rose higher, illuminating the ruins and the path ahead, Marcus Hale understood something profound. Even in the darkest, most desolate corners of space, life endured, hope prevailed, and the human heart, capable of care, love, and sacrifice, remained. The most powerful force in the universe,